Now let's take a few minutes and go over the different switch mechanisms you can find to operate a sump pump. One thing you want to keep in mind, no matter how great or how heavy duty the pump itself is, it's only as good as the switch mechanism that operates it. So here we have a very heavy duty pump. Plumbers love these pumps. They're workhorses. They last a lifetime when it comes to the motor and the impeller down at the bottom that moves the water. However, it's the switch mechanism that is his weakness. These switches are notorious for going out every 1 to 2 years. They work off barometric pressure. There's a rubber diaphragm inside this housing. As the water level rises, it pushes the diaphragm up against the switch to send power to the pump to operate. These go out, require replacement. Unfortunately, you don't find out until you get water in the basement to tell you got a bad sump pump. Not the best choice. Here we have a different type of switch that's very common. It's a tethered float switch. One thing you want to be concerned about is these floats are hollow. Should they ever fill with water because they're sitting down in the water, they'll sink to the bottom and not operate, which leads to water in your basement. Another concern is that everybody likes to extend the length of the cord to get the most amount of water in the basin before the pump activates. The problem is it takes a large amount of space in the basin to operate this kind of a switch. They tend to get hung up on the side of the basin, which means water in your basement. So it really may not be your best choice. And if you're looking to put a battery backup system in your basin, forget it. There's too much room that this takes up in order to do that. Here's another pump, again, with a tethered switch. Another pump, tethered switch. There's a bunch of them out there. This is an interesting design. In the waterproofing industry, we found over time that vertical floats seem to be the most reliable. Here's a design where they have 2 vertical float switches inside a cage. They work on low voltage. They call it millivoltage. They're called reed switches. And it basically sends an electronic signal to a control panel to tell this pump it's time to operate. So that this type of a design should work well over a long period of time. Here we have a more traditional vertical float switch known in our industry, and basically it's a plastic ball that floats in the water on a steel rod. And what you have to be concerned about with this particular design is as the float rises, sometimes the steel rod comes with it, and that could get hung up on something like the cord, or it might get hung up in the hole it passes through out of the plastic arm for the switch. So I'd be concerned with the movement of the steel rod and the plastic arm that activates the switch on this particular design. But one thing you want to understand, what makes this pretty reliable, is this arm that sticks out of the pump. If this comes in contact with the side of the basin, the switch still has room to operate without getting stuck. That's one reason they become very reliable. Here we have a design where it's got a vertical float, but you got to do some homework on this one because it appears it may be hollow. And if this float is hollow, it can fill with water and sink to the bottom over time. Here's a good design. You've got a solid plastic float. Here you have a metal arm coming out of the switch housing, which is good. My only concern here is this float really kind of moves around freely, and it could get hung up on something. But other than that, it's a pretty good design. Here we have another solid plastic float that goes up and down. This one's much sturdier. My only concern would be the plastic arm that comes out of the switch housing that could fail in a short period of time. I don't know how strong that is. And basically that's a good explanation of what to look for in switches.